Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all to the Congressman Harris's town hall. Thank you for being here. First of all, the staff and the congressman would like to thank Dr. Barbara Vinier and the entire staff here at Chesapeake College for their help in getting this event together. With that goes a special thanks to Michelle Hall. Michelle is the Chesapeake College's events coordinator, and she put all of this and helped us put this together. So let's give her a hand. All right, hopefully you all saw the college has put out rules of conduct for the evening. Please, we ask that you abide by those rules. And whatever you brought with you tonight, please take with you when you leave so that the cleanup can be at a minimum. We would appreciate that very much. And now, if you would, I'd like to introduce for the invocation tonight, Pastor Rick Bowers.
Good evening. Thanks to everyone for coming out this evening. And before I pray, allow me just a moment. I pray in the name of Jesus because of my faith. If your faith does not agree, then please don't waste your time being offended. Just simply take these few moments and pray in a manner that is consistent with your faith. Let us pray. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we humbly approach you this day to ask your blessing on this event. We're eternally grateful for all of the blessings you have generously provided. Most of them we take for granted. We rarely take time to thank you for allowing us to be citizens of this great country. And we are thankful that our founding fathers relied upon your principles in forming this republic. It is this foundation that allows us to gather this evening in this place and discuss issues that affect us and impact our lives. I thank you, Heavenly Father, for Congressman Harris and his family and his staff. I thank you for all the attendees here tonight. Thank you for bringing us here safely. And thank you in advance for a safe return home. May the events of the evening bring glory to you and serve the greater purpose that you have set. Allow us a time of thoughtful discussion and sharing. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Now, if you would please, can we all rise and welcome the Easton High School Navy Junior ROTC program in the presentation of our colors.
Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, have your seat. It'll take just a second. I'd like now to introduce our moderator for this evening. That is Doug Kawakami. Doug is a small business owner and lives here in Easton, in the Easton area. I met Doug for the first time only a few weeks ago when he attended my office hours in Bel Air. That's a quote from Andy. He is a local leader for a growing citizens movement called No Labels. No Labels includes Democrats, Republicans, independents, and everyone in between dedicated to bringing America's political leaders together to solve problems through bipartisanship. In the spirit of bipartisanship at work, No Labels helped inspire the creation of a new Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress, which features almost 40 Democrats and Republicans who are committed to finding a way to forge cooperation across the table. So would you please welcome our moderator for the evening, Doug Kawakami.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I am definitely not a pro at this. This is the first time I've ever chatted or been in front of a crowd this big. I think the last large crowd I was ever in front of was maybe 10 people, so forgive me, I'm a little nervous. Wow, pretty amazing. This is democracy in action, isn't it? Give yourselves a hand. My goal tonight is to cover as many questions as possible in the limited amount of time. In order to do that, we've got a bunch of questions. I will pull these out randomly, and the congressman or his staff has not seen these, so these are questions that are all from you. If you see me putting a question back, that just means that a question very similar was asked, because we want to cover as much possible, as many topics, okay, and get as many answers. That being said, okay, I know there's a lot of opinions on both sides, left, right, middle. If we can treat each other in a civil manner and treat the congressman in a civil manner, it would make things it would make things go smoother, okay? I think all of us want our questions answered, and we have a limited amount of time, so let's get this thing going. Without further ado, I would like to it's my privilege to introduce the Congressman from Maryland's 1st District, Congressman Andy Harris.
Is this on now? Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. Good evening. Welcome all here. I see there are some empty seats around, so if you're standing and you need a seat, there are a few up in the balcony, there are a few in the middle here. Welcome, everybody. We're going to conduct the town hall the same way I always do. I always start showing about 10 slides, just as a background of what I think is important and what guides me in some of the judgments I have to make. So if I could have the first slide. This is a slide that shows federal deficits, and since it's a deficit, the bigger the deficit, the further down it is. Back in the year 2000, we actually had a little bit of a surplus. I'll tell you, it wasn't really a surplus because, you know, what they do is they take Social Security money, and if you put it into the trust account and they spend it out of it, they don't count that as a deficit spending. But the budget situation was pretty good. And then, of course, in 2001, you had September 11th. With a whole lot of anti-terrorism spending, Homeland Security spending, our deficits went to about $400 billion in 2003. They started to inch back up to about I hate to say only, but only $200 billion. But then, of course, with the Great Recession, we went to a deficit of $1.4 trillion. So this is an annual deficit, the amount we spend more each year than we take in. And keep in mind, our federal budget is at this time, it was about $3 trillion, $3.2 trillion. So you're running a deficit that's literally spending about half as much more as you take in. It kind of worked its way up, and last year, or 2 years ago in 2014, it went to about $400 billion, and then now it's come back. It's increased more now. So the deficit has increased. That line has come back down to about $488 billion. We run about a $500 billion deficit, and that's something that obviously you won't go on forever. The next slide actually shows pictorially our deficit. If you express it, the last slide expressed it just in actual dollars, inflation-adjusted dollars. This expresses it as percent of the gross domestic product. And if you look at where we had the largest increase in our federal debt, so it's the total debt, not the deficit now, the total federal debt as percent of our gross domestic product, the Civil War, it went up to about 25% of our gross domestic product. World War II, obviously our largest expenditure, large sectors of the economy. The federal government had to borrow a lot of money in order to win World War II. It went up to almost 100% of GDP. It came down as World War II ended. We had prosperity. In the Reagan years, it actually built up because it built up with increased defense spending. Came back down. I got to tell you, if you take time doing this, it's less time for questions, and I think most people are here for questions. If we could have quiet and show respect for the other. Ladies and gentlemen, I said I was going to conduct this town hall the same way I've conducted every town hall I've conducted. I always start. We'll try again. Okay, in 20. So if you see it, it's a result of the.
As your moderator, okay, I've been told that the congressman only has about 10 slides. These 10 slides are going to cover some of the things that you're all going to want to know. The healthcare bill, some of the other things. It's like 10 slides. As your neighbor and as your citizen, okay, we have a very limited amount of time. Okay. I think it would behoove us to go through the slides. Okay. It will probably only take a few minutes. We want to get to the questions, right? Okay. All right.
We're here on the slide. We're at about 75% of our GDP. Our federal debt now, sir, you have to stay seated. The rules of the college were, sir, the college has the rules. If you're disruptive, you'll be asked to leave, okay? Respect the other people here, please. Now, so here we are, we're at about 75% of our GDP for debt, projected to increase to levels that we haven't even seen in World War II. And I would offer that we are not nearly in the type of situation we were in World War II. Can I have next slide? The looming insolvencies. If we don't do something, Social Security disability will be insolvent in 2023. Medicare insolvent in 11 years. Social Security elderly insolvent in 2035. And that's the math. Next slide. So as I went to approach what we should do in terms of the ACA, because we're going to have a lot of questions on the ACA. 3 goals of it. 1 is protect pre-existing conditions. We have to make certain that everybody with pre-existing condition has protection. The second one, and that slide's wrong, is reform Medicaid, not Medicare. Medicare, we're leaving alone in the ACA reform. Reform Medicaid. And the third one, which is very important, is lower premiums. The next slide. If you look at total Medicaid spending, this starts in 2009, 7 years ago. It was under $400 billion a year. We're now at 2018, fiscal year 2018, we're at $600 billion a year. And within 7 years, we will be at $900 billion a year. 2.5 times where we were in 2009. This is the largest. Medicaid spending is now the most rapidly growing portion of the federal budget, and the largest contributor to the increasing federal deficit and debt. Next slide. Now, if Medicaid performed well, that might be all right. But in a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the only randomized study ever to look at what happens when someone gets Medicaid versus not getting Medicaid, it looked over a 2-year period, and you won't be able to read that. The print's too small. I'll summarize it. On most outcome measures, they could detect no difference whether you got Medicaid or didn't, because our Medicaid program just plain doesn't deliver what it should deliver. And as taxpayers, we should be furious about that, because we spend $400 billion a year now in federal tax dollars. Next slide. Now, while that's true, this slide, and all of you should take a close look at this, this actually shows the insurance company profits since the Affordable Care Act was put in place. Now, no matter whether you look at Aetna, Cigna, United Health, all of these companies have significantly higher profits now than when the Affordable Care Act was put in place. Next slide. In fact, if you look at the cost, this is the Care First Silver level plan on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, right here on the Eastern Shore. Care First Silver level in 2014, when the Affordable Care Act first came into play, and I'm just going to look at the age 60, because I'm age 60. So I'm going to look at the age 60 graph. $499 a month. This year, $975 a month. In 4 years, the premiums for a 60-year-old on the Affordable Care Act have doubled. Doubled to a point where they're largely unaffordable. Next slide. In fact, if you look at that 60-year-old, and you compare what the cost on the 2017 exchange PPOs in Maryland, the preferred provider, versus the Maryland Health Insurance Plan, which was our high-risk pool. It wasn't even our normal risk pool, it was our high-risk pool. In 2015, the premiums are roughly 80% higher on the Affordable Care Act. So that there are ways you can go to bring down premiums. Next slide. In fact, but you can bring down premiums. One of the ways is the way they did it in Maine, which is actually reinstitute a high-risk pool. It was called their blind high-risk pool. And again, let's look at the 60-year-olds. They brought the premiums in Maine from $1,200 a month to $645 a month by doing one thing, bringing in a high-risk pool. Next slide. I think I may only have one more. Oh, all right, last slide. Good news, last slide. Let's have a cheer, come on. Last slide. But if we really want to deal with the cost of health care, we have to start dealing with the big diseases. And it's beyond just taking care of insurance, well, that's important. This slide shows the effect of Alzheimer's and the cost of Alzheimer's to America. Now, I want to ask for a show of hands how many people know someone with Alzheimer's, has someone in the family, some friend in the neighborhood. But this last year, the federal government spent $160 billion treating patients with Alzheimer's on Medicaid and Medicare. $160 billion a year. Projected to increase by 2050, when the baby boomers are fully aged, to $735 billion. In fact, and of course, the line on top shows that we expect the number of people with Alzheimer's disease to roughly increase by 150. Ma'am, if you yell one more time like that, I'm going to ask the campus security to get out of here. Okay? Thank you. Now, you may not want to hear about Alzheimer's now, but you will at some point in your life. You will. Now, So beyond health care, talking about insurance is important. We have to deal with diseases like Alzheimer's that in the end will truly bankrupt our healthcare system. Anyway, with that, I think that's the last slide. Is that right? Roll it to the next one. Yes, that's it. You're up.
All right, guys, ready for the first question? All right. At random. Congressman Harris, do you still support eliminating the $79 million for the cleanup of the bay?
Okay, good question. The $79 million is money in the EPA budget. The president, of course, building up the defense budget, said he needs to find savings elsewhere, said one of the areas they're going to cut is the EPA, and proposed eliminating the $79 billion that's annually put into a fund. Okay, so there's $79 billion a year appropriated to the several states that surround the Chesapeake Bay to pay for Chesapeake Bay cleanup. It includes money that goes to farmers and other things. And it's not just Maryland, it's Pennsylvania, New York, very important because they're the headwaters of the bay. That's where pollution comes. Now, we need to preserve the Chesapeake Bay. We need to preserve the $79 billion. We do. Come on. Nobody disagrees with that. We need to make sure that $79 million is spent wisely, and it's spent in a way that makes sure that we don't hurt our economy. But that can be done pretty easily. So I will advocate for the $79 million to remain in the budget, and making sure that $79 million, that portion, it's a small portion spent in Maryland on the Eastern Shore, is spent in a way that, again, helps our farmers, doesn't hurt our farmers, and in the way it is now, a lot of it does. It goes to programs that actually help them reduce pollution. So yes, the answer is, I support that program, and I've said it publicly.
All right, the second question. I'm going to go to the bottom of the pile here. You are a physician. Why have you, I can't read this.
Trying to take away our health
Okay.
care.
Sorry, I can't read the writing.
It's a madness.
Truly. Would you vote for a
Doctor
budget?
handwriting. I probably can interpret that.
Can you?
Let me see. Okay, I'm a physician. Why have you co-sponsored I tell you, doctors read the other doctor's handwriting. We can read it. Why have you co-sponsored a bill that repeals nutrition standards for school lunches and breakfasts, and why would you vote to declassify methane and other polluting gases as non-polluting? Okay, let me answer the first one. It's about H.R. 610. H.R. 610 is a bill that addresses the fact that what it does is it says the federal government has got to get out of the education business because it doesn't help. Because the best solutions, the best education decisions are not made in Washington, D.C., in the Federal Triangle. They're made in your local jurisdiction. Your local school board knows best how to teach students in that jurisdiction. You don't need someone in Washington, and you don't need someone in Annapolis telling you how to do it. So H.R. 610 says that Washington is going to take the money that goes to education, the federal money goes to education, and turn it over to the states. And it's going to tell the states, that if they have to, they can use it in poorly performing districts like Baltimore City, Prince George's County. They can do voucher programs. And it's going to tell them, well, how many of you, let me ask a question here. How many of you yelling no are from Baltimore City? Oh, I've got two people from Baltimore City here. You are lucky here that you don't have underperforming schools. But there are people in this state, there are people in this state, again, places like Baltimore City, places like Prince George County, where those schools are underperforming, they're failing, and your tax dollars go to those schools right now. Now, I think that we shouldn't reward failing school districts with federal tax dollars. We should let the states, give the states the money, and let them figure out how to do it. Oh, I know. Oh, the other one was the nutrition standards. Okay. So one little thing that happened is they added, the Department of Education added some enhanced nutrition standards for the school lunch program. Now the problem was, that sounds, and as a physician, that sounds really good on paper. I mean, gosh, if our children just ate only healthy food and ate all their vegetables and all the healthy food, that would be great. But I had 5 children. They don't want to eat that food. So if you give them that food in school, so what's happened is we asked. What they do is they survey the waste after that change in the program. And it turns out the children, a lot of them just don't eat as much food when you give them healthy food. They choose not to eat it. So you know what? I would rather the child eat their lunch than throw out the lunch. I would rather let the local jurisdiction decide what is right for the children in that jurisdiction. Shouldn't be made by someone in Washington. Next question.
All right, you guys ready for the third question? Congressman, why did you approve cabinet members whose intention it is to scuttle department's example state education environment?
I'm in the House of Representatives. You have to wait for a senator's town hall for that. I don't do anything about appointments to the cabinet. Next question.
This is a question SR 610. I think we already had one.
Yeah.
Blank. Will you still be able to sleep at night if you were to repeal the ACA? When the first people on Medicare expansion die due to lack of health insurance?
All right, let's put up slide 5. Look, I'm just what the audience wants. Can we go to slide 5? Shows the study. That's the best way I can answer that question about Medicaid. The fact of the matter is, look, it's an inconvenient truth that Medicaid, the outcomes on people who are given Medicaid, who are put on Medicaid, in a scientific study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the only randomized study showed there's no better outcome. We need to reform Medicaid. We need to turn it back to the states so the states make the decision what's best for their people. Next question.
Okay, next question. You have co-sponsored H.R. 637, the Stopping EPA Overreach Act of 2017. The bill amends the Clean Air Act to exclude CO2, water vapor, HFCs, PFCs, etc. With the exception of PFCs and water vapor, all these compounds have significant potential for global warming and have climate change and I think something risk. On what basis have you decided that these compounds do not need to be regulated?
In Maryland, it wouldn't be too bad. We actually have a pretty good Maryland Department of the Environment here. Look, the balance between the environment, there's always a balance that has to be there. And the question is whether overregulation harms your economy to the extent that you can no longer I guess we have no coal miners in this audience. Look, there has to be a balance between the, look, the last, are you all done? Let's review the climate change. Is climate changing? Clearly climate's changing. The question is, clearly, okay? I'll admit it. And nobody doesn't admit it. There are two questions. One is, what are the contributing factors? And the other one is, can you alter those factors in a way that would significantly decrease it without harming the economy? Now, well, I think there needs to be a balance. You all, if you disagree, like I say, I think there needs to be a balance. I think we can't have 2% economic growth. You know, the last 10 years, we've had the slowest. We have never had a 10-year period where our economic growth did not exceed 2%, ever. We need to get economic growth back. Economic growth is what gives us the ability to actually do environmental regulation. Countries that don't have growth, that don't have a stable economy, don't. Let's go to the next question.
Are women entitled to choose their health care provider? Why do you selectively defund a health care provider which delivers only safe, essential, and legal services to women?
Not only women, but men. Everyone should be able to choose their health care provider. You know, remember, we were promised with the Affordable Care Act, if you like your doctor, you can keep them, you couldn't. Let's get to the point of this question. You should choose whatever provider you want, but a majority of Americans believe that taxpayer dollars should not be used to fund abortions. That's it.
Okay, I had to pick one that was a different color. What is your opinion of President Trump's proposed budget that would slash federal assistance for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup from $73 million to $0? How would this impact Maryland's most precious natural resources and the nation's largest
I think we did
waterway?
that one.
Okay. I think we had that question before. Okay, this is on nutrition. That was asked. Okay, that's on the healthcare again. That's on 610. I think we've covered a question there. Okay, this is an interesting one. Will you support an independent investigation into the Russian ties to the Trump campaign? If not, why not?
Sure. Sure. All right. So, and right now, an investigation is going on, as you know. It's going on in the House Committee of Jurisdiction. The way when investigations are begun, they're always begun in the Congress themselves because we have oversight. It's an executive branch issue, and we have oversight of it. That's conducted by a bipartisan committee. It is a bipartisan committee. Let that investigation go. I believe it's going to be pretty rapid. If it appears that we can't get information, that for some reason it's biased, I want an unbiased investigation, but the first step is always the investigation by the House and the Senate, because we have oversight in Congress. So I support investigating it. I want to know what they find. I want to hear some of the testimony, and then I'll decide. This is way too early to decide if we need, because we could have independent investigations of a lot of things. So let's wait. Let's hear what that investigation does.
Dear Dr. Harris, as the father of a child whose disabilities became apparent shortly after MMR booster, I have been navigating the mental health insurance system for over 30 years. This has been a perilous journey fraught with roadblocks, delays, and divisive rejections that have led to numerous hospitalizations. My original commercial insurance was an insult in the face of dire and urgent conditions. Fighting our way through Medicaid was the only way to get my daughter the treatment that would save her life. Now many of those hard-fought battles could be voided by the stroke of a pen. Please do not become compliant in sacrificing my daughter's future.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate that. The Medicaid program, remember, covers two classes of people. The first are the elderly, sick, and disabled, traditional Medicaid. The poor who are elderly, sick, and disabled. And then the Medicaid expansion was the part that was affected by the ACA. Interestingly enough, when we go back in the American Health Care Act, it actually treats those two populations differently. Because what it says is it actually puts in increased funding, because we actually, when we do the per capita block grants for the elderly, sick, and disabled, we actually increase it by higher than the medical rate of inflation per year. But we don't do that for the other group, which are the non-elderly, sick, and disabled. So anyone who's in that situation where you're depending on Medicaid to provide help for the elderly, sick, and disabled, take a good look at the way the American Health Care Act actually treats the two populations differently. And I would offer that as a society, our first obligation is to the poor, elderly, sick, and disabled. We should restore that. We should make sure that that's covered. I won't get into it, but in a strange way, the way the Affordable Care Act was implemented, the amount the federal government pays for the expansion group was 90%. The amount in Maryland that they pay for the elderly, sick, and disabled is about 52%. So if you think about it a little bit, when the state hits a financial road bump, and states hit financial road bumps, and they have to cut back on Medicaid, their tendency will be to cut back on the elderly, sick, and disabled because they get more federal money from the other group. So if they cut back the other group, they lose federal dollars. We remove that incentive to actually take cuts into the elderly, sick, and disabled. Next question. By the way, I think there's summaries of the amended American Health Care Act in the back. I think there's going to be another amendment this week, but There are summaries of the latest amended version in the back available to you if you want.
This has already been asked.
What about tax credits for insurance executives?
This week, you voted to allow companies like Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T to sell America's internet histories without their knowledge or consent. You received at least $3 million towards your re-election from the telecom companies.
I don't think so.
By voting for this, how can you ensure your constituents that you are committed to protecting their privacy?
Absolutely. First of all, the $3 million is fake news. I have no idea where you got $3 million from on it. But look, what this... All right, when you sign up with an ISP, an internet service provider, fact of the matter is they actually tell you what they do with your information. And in a free marketplace, you have the choice of going to an internet service provider that shares your information and one that doesn't share your information. So, all right? So this is something, if you don't believe that if you want an internet... Let's go on to the next question.
This was on the Chesapeake Bay. Is there any consideration being given to replacing Paul Ryan?
Not at this time. Next question.
Blank.
How about replacing Andy Harris?
Another question at Chesapeake Bay. The White House recently threatened to work with the Democrats. Will you and your Freedom Caucus colleagues commit to continuing pushing towards such bipartisan cooperation?
Look, the best policy is bipartisan policy, there's no question about it. I will tell you the reason why the Affordable Care Act is a mess. And it is a mess because you can't have $1,000 a month premiums for healthy 60-year-olds. You can't do it. The reason is it was passed without bipartisan agreement. So it created a huge partisan divide in the country, and that's where we stand now. Now, would the fix of it be better if it were bipartisan? Yeah, it would. We have not had people, except a handful, reach across the aisle to agree with the president who was duly elected on a platform of repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. I welcome that. Next question.
Representative Harris, will you support an independent counsel or a commission investigate the Trump campaigns? I think we already had that one done, right? Will you support USDA funding for development of affordable housing?
Yeah, I do every year. I mean, it comes before my committee. I'm actually on the Agriculture Subcommittee of Appropriations. I support the federal agency in FDA that actually supports rural housing, including affordable housing. I vote for it every year.
Healthcare question. Do I take a question on Planned Parenthood?
What's that?
Take a question on Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood provides valuable and crucial health care. for thousands in our district. Why would you possibly want to defund them?
Because if you look actually in the district and you look nationally, healthcare, if you want real healthcare, comprehensive healthcare, I don't mean just the small amount of services that Planned Parenthood provides. If you believe in truly comprehensive health care, you would support the community health clinics. There are more than 13 community health clinics for every Planned Parenthood clinic. And these community health clinics do things like mammograms, do things like all the screening necessary. And they do it without spending taxpayer dollars in an organization that does abortion. Next question.
Do you support any type of bipartisan governing? Republican, Democrats, please explain.
Do I support any bipartisan government?
Yeah. Do you support any type of bipartisan governing?
Of course, we're in America. We celebrate multipartisanship. We have a country that if you notice, every 8 to 12 years actually changes from one president's party to another president's party. We have now in the state, we have a governorship. We occasionally get Republican governors. And in my lifetime, the House of Representatives and the Senate have passed multiple times from one party to the other. America likes bipartisanship. But at any point in time, in the House, for instance, you have a majority. In the Senate, you may have a majority. In the President, it has to be from one party to the other. The country has chosen whether everyone likes it or... Oh, well... I'm not sure how anyone can disagree that the country has chosen by... Wow. Has chosen Republicans in charge of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. That doesn't mean that we don't work with Democrats. We welcome it. And in fact, if you look, for instance, look at the vote that Ben Carson had. You know, former Maryland citizen. Well, all I can tell you, a lot of Democrats in the Senate disagreed with those boos because he actually had a strongly bipartisan vote. Several of the president's cabinet members, strongly bipartisan votes. So on issues, there's going to be bipartisan agreement, and on some other issues, there's just not going to be. But that's the way America works. And we should be thankful of it because it's the best way in the world for that to work.
Where do you stand on super PAC money in elections?
Look, if we level the playing field, and actually it's interesting because when I was in the state Senate, Senator Pinsky was from Prince George's County. He had proposed a campaign finance reform bill, actually going to public funding, and I offered actually to co-sponsor with him on one condition: that in addition to disallowing a lot of those bigger contributions, we actually said that the labor unions also can't contribute. That seems fair. It's either everybody can get in or no one can get in. He said that wasn't possible. Now, ladies and gentlemen, until we get all the big money out, until we get all the big money out, we have to be careful about limiting some people's ability and not others. So I'm the first one to say, if we take all the big money out, let's take the union money out, because ladies and gentlemen, you do all realize hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars spent by labor unions in the last presidential election. Let's take it all out, but don't just take part of it out. Next question.
The DEA continues to authorize ever larger quantities of opiates. Why not cut off the problem at the source? 80% of all opiates produced worldwide are consumed in the USA. Why not cut production?
Wow. Yeah. Look, it's a fine line. I don't know if I'm sure in an audience this size, someone has been deeply touched in their family by this opioid crisis, and I mean deeply touched. The fact of the matter is, some people need it, but probably far fewer less than have been given it. And look, that's my profession's fault, in part. It is, and I'm the first to admit it. I'm the first, when we had, for instance, common sense measures like the drug programs where PDMPs, prescription drug monitoring programs. Thank you, prescription drug monitoring programs. I remember the acronym. I don't remember it's like Washington. So the prescription drug monitoring program is very simple. When a pharmacy fills a prescription for a narcotic, it goes into a central database that is protected for privacy and has the patient's identification in it, an identifier for the patient. So that if the patient goes to another provider, even across a state line, and requests a narcotics prescription, that provider has a means to look up and see whether that patient is already getting a prescription. This is huge. This is huge because the drug-seeking behavior, and believe me, I experienced it. As an anesthesiologist, I'd have patients, post-operatively who'd ask for a narcotic prescription. I know they don't really need a narcotic, but they'd ask for it. And I'm always wondering, why are they asking for it? Now we have a means. I'm a strong supporter of that. I'm a supporter of making sure that we can look across state lines because, for instance, in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, very important. Because if we can't talk to a pharmacy in Delaware, we can't see what's happening at a pharmacy in Delaware, it doesn't do us much good. So we have to do that. That's the first and most important thing we have to do is make sure we can ascertain if someone who's getting a prescription really needs that prescription. Beyond that, again, people in my profession, they complain, oh, it's another hoop we have to jump to. Listen, this epidemic, and it's nothing short of an epidemic, is so serious that, we have to take steps where some people say, oh, no, you've got to do it. And we've just got to do it. This is something, and again, we passed the CARE Act last year. We've passed acts that have made the federal government better in dealing with and giving grants out locally. We have several grants in this district on opioid addiction. We have to deal with this. This is probably one of the most serious public health care crises we have in this country right now. Next question.
Dr. Harris, I am an American, in parentheses, of Korean descent, and my parents entered the U.S. legally. It makes me so sad to qualify myself this way after having living almost my entire life in Maryland. But the rhetoric of your party made that necessary. Are you aware that the Trump administration's agenda for a wall, a ban, and punishment for sanctuary cities are alienating U.S. citizens, labeling all minorities as foreign and suspicious? How are you speaking out against these policies, and what are you doing to promote diversity and tolerance in Maryland?
Sure. It's a great question. As you know, I'm the son of immigrants. I understand how important immigration is to what America is. But the fact of the matter is, we have immigration laws. And a lot of people who come to this country, like my parents and perhaps the writer of the question, come to this country because we are a nation of laws. And I've visited other countries in the world, and it's very interesting because in other countries, we assume that everywhere in the world they follow laws. They don't.
Yeah, like the Trump White House.
And so, what we have to ask the question is, should we insist that immigration laws be followed? I would offer that the answer is yes. Now, should we do it compassionately? Yes, we should. But having open borders and what truly was a catch and release program does no one any good. And the people who think that there should be sanctuary jurisdictions, let me address this to you. The only law regarding immigration ever can be federal law. That's the way the Constitution's written. Federal law preempts every other, and it makes sense. Because immigration law has to do about whether you're immigrating to America or not. So the fact of the matter is that we have laws, we should enforce them. Now, do we need immigrants? Yeah, we need immigrants. Do we need temporary workers especially? Yes, we do. Here on the Eastern Shore, huge needs for our agriculture industry, for our tourism industry, for our seafood processing industry. But the fact of the matter is, we expect people to come here as immigrants, obeying the law. So, do I believe in us being an inclusive country? Absolutely, that's what we are. But I believe we have to follow the rule. If we don't like the immigration laws, then change the immigration laws. That's the way it works. That's the way it works.
What is your main agenda in the House? What is your main agenda in the House to support and strengthen the middle class? And what will you do to provide support to the working poor?
Sure. Look, the most important thing we can do, and by the way, I know we're getting close to that. Let's go another 15 minutes, though, because we got a big bucket of questions. Let's stay and go a little longer. The most important thing we can do for the middle class and the working poor is get our economy going again. The fact of the matter is, again, you all know, I mean, it's been 10 years we haven't had significant economic growth. The median family income, we've had growth of less than 2% per year. The median family income today is lower than it was 10 years ago. The only way to get that moving is get the economy going. So what do I agree with the president. I almost hesitate to say that word in this crowd. I agree with the president that we have to get our economy growing 3 to 4% a year. How do we do it? First of all, we bring manufacturing back into this country. We stop the manufacturing leaving the country. The most important way to do it is make America attractive again for business, the way Larry Hogan made Maryland attractive for business. Well, all I can tell you is the economy of Maryland's doing pretty good since he was elected. And I believe the economy is going to get better. We have to go back and we have to look at every regulation we have and say, let's do the balance. Does this do more harm than good? Let's go to our tax system and make sure that we're not chasing anyone out anywhere by tax policy. We've got to do those two things, get the economy going. When our economy was moving at 3 to 4% per year, we had 3 to 4% growth. We had the median family income go up year after year after year after year. That's what it takes. When you stagnate the economy, it's the middle class that suffers. Look, the rich will always do well. You have to get the economy going to get the middle class going. Next question.
Donald Trump made lots of promises. Donald Trump made lots of promises, and building a wall was one of them. He promised that Mexico was going to pay for it. That was a lie. Right now, contractors are submitting bids to build the wall that Mexico refuses to pay. This will make our country's deficit even bigger. Do you support American taxpayers paying this huge bill? If yes, then will you increase taxes on the rich to pay for this so that the middle class and the poor do not have a heavier tax burden and a loss of services to build something that most Americans don't want?
Most Americans actually want a secure border. They want a secure border. Now, that being said, does that mean a wall everywhere? No. But there are parts of the border where if you don't have a wall, a well-constructed barrier of some kind, and we say wall, but if you look at it, some of them don't actually look like walls, but a well-constructed barrier are just necessary on some parts of our border. Huge amounts of drugs cross from Mexico. The drug cartels in Mexico get rich, letting things flow across our border. If I was convinced that we could enforce and secure our border without building walls, then let's do it. But it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. We have hundreds of thousands of people coming across our southern border. If our Border Patrol says we need walls and some action, we should build them. Next question.
I think he hears you loud and clear. Do you believe that health care is a human right? And if so, how will you ensure that all Marylanders have access to good, affordable health care, particularly if the Affordable Care Act is repealed?
Look, I think in Maryland we actually have great health care. I mean, we really do compared to other parts of the country. Now, the question is, how am I going to assure that Maryland has good health care? I'm going to do it. I believe what we do is we do it by turning as much of it as possible over to the state, because our state has a record of actually delivering pretty good health care. Now, some other states might not, but then again, I don't represent other states. I represent Maryland. I believe that we can actually do a better job in Maryland than the federal government is doing guaranteeing that. Next question.
Do you support having President Trump release his tax records?
Sure. I wish he released his tax records, but it's not up to me. It was up to the voters of America to decide if that was important. And you know what? He won the election. Next question.
Do you think Chairman Nunes, is it Nunes? Do you think Chairman Nunes should step down as chairman? Second part to the question, how are we as American citizens going to obtain the truth?
How what? How do we what?
How are we as American citizens going to obtain the truth?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we kind of answered part of it. Look, I don't sit on the Intelligence Committee. I don't sit on Oversight and Government Reform. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. The fact of the matter is, I don't have enough information to know whether he should step down, because that's. Excuse me. Can I finish? Can I finish? Honestly, I don't have the security clearance to get that information. The Intelligence Committee has that clearance. I don't have the security clearance. The Intelligence Committee members have higher levels of clearance. They have access to all the information. Now, let me tell you, it's a bipartisan committee. I'm sure, like I said, they're going to have hearings on this whole issue, and we're going to find out whether or not Chairman Nunes said something or did something that would disqualify him from being chairman. I don't have evidence now, but I can't get it. I don't have the clearance to get that information. Next question. I don't. Okay.
Do you support cuts in food stamps, SNAP, and why?
Food stamps. Oh, SNAP, and why? What I support, and look, food stamps are important. We need to make sure that no one goes to bed hungry in this country. But I think the last expansion, we have roughly doubled the amount we spend on food stamps in the last 6 years. And in the last expansion, we expanded it, let me finish, we expanded it to able-bodied single people. Now I've got to tell you, very simple requirement. I held out for a simple requirement, which we don't have in all states, that if you get food stamp, we're going to give you food stamp. You're able-bodied single, so again, it's not a parent, not a child. You're an able-bodied adult. You have to either train for a job, look for a job, or get a job. That's it. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're able-bodied single adult, why is that not unreasonable to ask you to go and try to get work? I think that's reasonable. Next question.
Do you yourself believe in climate change? And do you agree with Scott Pruitt's latest statement that carbon dioxide emissions or human activity are not necessarily primary contributors to global warming?
That's okay. So the first question is, do I believe in climate? I already said yes. Climate change is occurring. The second question is, because the second part of that question actually confounds two things, is CO2 or human activity and/or human activity. Yeah, CO2 contributes to it, no question to it, but we don't know how much it contributes and what the extent of the contribution is. We just don't. And as proof, and as proof that we don't know it, if you go back to the IPPC modeling, if you go back to the IPPC modeling of about 8 years ago, they had projected a far greater increase in temperature than we actually have now, so the model isn't quite perfect yet. Now, that being said, we know that. It doesn't... all the projections are based on models. Until we get the model more accurate, we always have to ask the question, is the regulation we're putting in place going to harm more than it helps? Next question.
Under the proposed health care plan, those earning over $250,000 will get huge tax breaks, while 24 million people will lose their health insurance. How do you justify that?
Look, I think that we shouldn't tolerate a solution where 24 million people lose, and we use lose, but remember, some are forced to buy it now, and they will choose not to do it. I get it. So they estimate 24 million people less will get it. But that presumes that we can't bring down premiums significantly. If we bring down premiums significantly, like I showed you they did in Maine, by incorporating a high-risk pool, that number is not as high. Now, in terms of the tax break for $250,000, remember, we're just returning things. We're eliminating the increase that was occurred. That's the facts. We're just eliminating the increase. Now, we need tax reform in the country. That's going to be part of it. Wait until the whole package is out. The bottom line is, I believe Americans are taxed too much. Next question.
Dr. Harris, how does cutting the budgets of NASA, NOAA, and the NIH, and the State Department, how does that make America great again?
Now, first of all, the president's budgets, for those of you who are familiar with Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution, the president didn't even submit budgets for the longest period of time until the Budget Control Act 30 years ago, so 30 years ago, because the president really has no say in what appropriations are. The House and Senate do.
What's your opinion?
So I sit on the committee that does, let me see, you had NIH, you had NOAA. We don't do NOAA, we had, so those cuts are not going to occur because we will, now one thing we will do is we will increase the defense spending in the United States. Because we live in a much more dangerous world than we lived in 10 years ago, when our defense budget was $100 billion higher in real dollars. We have to increase our defense spending because we live in a dangerous world. Next question.
How do you propose that a ban on Muslims will protect Americans when the worst hate crimes in the last 50 years have been committed by white domestic terrorists?
No, look, I don't support a ban on Muslims. I mean, look, the First Amendment guarantees religious freedom. That being said, one of our most significant threats in the world are radical Islamic terrorists. If you disagree with that, they are a threat to Western civilization. Now, they are a small percent of Muslims in the world. But because they're a small percent doesn't mean they aren't there, doesn't mean that they don't commit terrorist acts, and doesn't mean that we should fight to eliminate radical Islamic terrorism in the world. Now, we should actually partner. We should partner with Muslim countries who agree with us on this, and there are many who agree with us. So, I don't agree in the Muslim ban. I got to tell you, I don't think a whole lot of people in America agree with the Muslim ban. But we should agree that we should band together with Muslim countries and other countries in the world to eradicate the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. How are we doing? A couple more.
Partisanship is at an all-time high. Please name some Democrats in the House you enjoy working with. What issues will you collaborate with Democrats on this year?
Sure. Let me tell you about a bill we had, I guess it was signed last year. It was signed by President Obama, actually. It was an interesting subject because as a physician, many of you may not realize, well, all of you realize that we have a shortage of transplant organs in the country. Interestingly enough, there was a rule that was actually in law that said that if an HIV-positive donor, and it could be either a live donor or a deceased donor, wanted to contribute an organ, it couldn't be donated, even to an HIV-positive recipient. That made no sense to me. So we reached across the aisle, both the House and the Senate. We wrote a bill that said, let's get that out of statute. Let's say that actually, yes, you can allow an HIV donor organ to be donated and placed in an HIV-positive recipient. They did the first one at Hopkins 8 months ago or so. Huge step forward. That's the kind of thing we reach across the aisle and we do things like that. Let me just say one other thing about partisanship. And this is important because you're all Marylanders. Now let me tell you something. How did DC get so partisan? How did Congress get so partisan? It's because I urge you all to look at a redistricting map of Maryland. Look at a redistricting map of Maryland. The fact of the matter is that now they got computers to draw maps. They draw districts that are either Republican or Democrat, and they've drawn out moderate districts nationwide. So look, and I've said gerrymanderings, right? Look, I am the beneficiary of a gerrymandered district. I'll admit it. I'm the beneficiary. But I testified in front of the governor's commission that went around the state and said, let's turn redistricting over to a nonpartisan commission. That's what we need. If we want to get partisanship out of Congress, you have to change redistricting into a nonpartisan where you don't have strange, bizarre district lines. I urge all of you, the 3rd district in Maryland, and look at a map. It is famous in Washington as the most gerrymandered district in the country. You can't have that. It's not good democracy, and it certainly ends up with partisanship in Washington. One last one. We're doing one more? One more. Yeah.
This will be the last question. The congressman is gracious enough to stay 15 minutes later. Okay, we're going to end with the health care question. Is health care a right or a commodity?
Wow. We should have a healthcare system designed in the United States that delivers high-quality care to every individual who needs health care. The question always is, how do you do it? Now, some of you here, I understand, because I heard some people had a big banner said single payer. Our closest experience to single payer in this country, and I will tell you this as a veteran. I want to ask how many veterans are in this audience. Our closest experience to single payer in this country is the VA health system. Oh, no, it's not Medicare. Do you know why it's not Medicare? Because on Medicare, you can get private insurance, and most people have add-on policies, or they're in Medicare Advantage. But in the VA, you don't get private insurance. You get VA treatment. VA has, let's go over some of the things. You all saw the problem with waiting lines at the VA. Worse than that, when the books were fudged for the waiting lines. Now, let's talk about the opioid problem. You can look up the facts. Veterans are much more likely to get an opioid prescription to treat pain than a person who's not in the VA system. That's not a system that works. So, might we end up in a single-payer system sometime? We might, but I sure hope it doesn't look like the VA system. Listen, I want to thank our moderator tonight. Did a great job. Great job. I want to thank everybody here. Because in this country, and it's not true in a lot of countries, you can agree to disagree without fear. That is tremendous. Appreciate it all the time. If you don't agree with me, God bless you. We're going to agree to disagree. But America is the best country in the world. God bless all of you. Thank you.